Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio. I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live and on demand from Buffalo, New York, where today is Sunday, March 5th, 2023. Tonight is AEW Revolution, live from the Chase Center in San Francisco, California. And today, I'm joined, as usual, by Jesse Collings and by Chris Gullo. A little bit disappointed in Chris Gullo this morning, though, because he forgot to hire security as I asked him to. But nonetheless, we're going to try to make it through this.
Security is expensive, man. Inflation.
Yes. and Jesse showed up the last minute. I thought he was going to no-show because of today's topic. Maybe he thought it was a grifter, that I'm trolling people and baiting people, but he is here. Hello, Jesse.
Having an audio issue. I apologize.
Okay. Anyway, we'll while he's working that up, we can get started.
Now I'm back.
Oh, you're back. You're good?
Yeah, I don't know what that was really weird.
Okay. But today we will talk about AEW's. AEW's not growing. AEW, but it really does. I'm going to show you the data, the facts, that AEW is not as hot as it once was. Chris Gullo, I hope, will at least be heavily moderating and monitoring the chat. If there is any unruly participants in the chat, their freedom of speech may be silenced on this private social media platform. Or if you want to send a super chat, we will answer your question or respond to your comment. The pay-per-view is tonight. Are you all watching the pay-per-view tonight?
That is the plan.
Yes, I will watch it. Are you watching it tonight, Gullo?
So far, that's a plan. We'll see how it goes.
What is your medium of choice here? Internationally, look at all these options. If we lived in other countries, but there's BR and traditional and movie theater. Anyone going to a movie theater?
I've talked to people who have done the movie theater viewing experience before, but it's not for me.
I feel like that's a long time in a movie theater.
Correct.
Yeah.
I've heard it can be fun if there's a lot of people there. It's kind of like a fun atmosphere to be in, but these shows are marathons, so I need to, and I'm not one of the people that's like the show's too long, it needs to be shorter or anything like that, but I need to be like within the comfort of my own home with, everything I need with, close by, any food, any drinks, have to use the bathroom. I just don't want to do that in like a public place.
What time will this show go off the air tonight?
I'm going to say 12:30 Eastern time, a.m.
And it's school night. Yeah.
I would have preferred for the show to be on Saturday for that reason. Just right. Especially because I'm probably going to want to watch the post-show press conference too. So that's probably not going to get over.
I have not thought about that until.
That's probably not going to get over till like maybe 2 a.m. Maybe earlier, maybe later.
Because that will be more than an hour, and it'll take a good 15 minutes or so for that to get started.
Mm-hmm. And Tony's not going to be like, "Oh, it's a school night, got to cut it short." He's going to be going. And is this the first? I don't think this is the first pay-per-view they've ever had that was on like a school night or a weekday night, technically, because it seems like if they've had shows on Saturdays on normal weekends, or if they're having a Sunday show, it's like all out, which
holiday,
is like Labor Day weekend.
Revolution last year was on a Sunday, and
okay,
it was March 6th. So I don't think that's a holiday on Monday.
This seems to be the only one that isn't on a holiday weekend. Revolution every year.
Yeah, I would have preferred it. I like the WWE shows when they're on Sunday because I'm way more apt to watch them live. But for an AEW show, the show's going to be running very late into the night, and I'm just more geared up for it generally. It's a lot harder. Someone in the comments says, think of the Europeans, and that yes, they have it even worse because of that time difference. And I wonder if that impacts your sales. Like if I don't know, if I was in Europe and I'm going to have to, it's one thing if I'm staying up to like 6 a.m. to watch a pay-per-view on a Saturday night, early Sunday morning. It's different if I'm staying up till 6 a.m. when I have to work on Monday. I think that, I don't know how big the pay-per-view market is out in Europe, but I'm sure it would hurt.
Well, plus with the show being on the West Coast, like crowd burnout's less likely to happen than if you were having the East
That's
Coast.
a
So it'll
good
be like,
thing.
oh, keep going,
Yeah.
keep going. You know, oh, we
Yeah,
got
I mean,
time.
but that's a good thing. You wouldn't want the crowd to be short. I mean, I said this earlier, but I would do the 60-minute Iron Man match to start the show. I think
it's going to be on last, though. Yeah, I don't
I
disagree with
think
you, but
like the traditional thing would be we got to have world title match, main event, whatever. But I just think from a show flow standpoint, you get that done early. It starts the show with this big, huge match. That 60 minutes will breeze by at the start of the show because most of the first 60 minutes of AEW shows tend to breeze by. And then the rest of the card can function without fans thinking, oh man, okay, we got to save our energy because we've got this marathon at the end of the show. Or I think the show would flow so much better if that 60-man Iron Man match is first. And I don't doubt that, like, if it goes on last, that's going to, be in front of a tired crowd and it's going to drag or anything like that. I just think the show flows so much better if the match is on first, and let the Texas Death Match be last.
Mm-hmm. We have predictions. Anyone want to? I will not. I will refrain from a prediction because I may or may not report the number. Prediction for the pay-per-view buys for this event.
110,000.
110,000. I have not added full gear to this chart because I don't feel like I know the number. I guess I should try to find out. Tony answered a question at the press conference last time. It made it sound like it was 140. I'm not so sure about that. The last two before that, All Out and Forbidden Door, were about 140. But maybe I can get an update and get some clarity on this.
I'll predict 123.
Okay. So are we all on the same page to begin with here? Do we all accept the premise that AEW's, can be careful with these words here, fan interest has weakened in, I don't know, the last year or so, let's say?
Yes.
Gullo?
Oh yeah, I would agree, especially since Triple H took over WWE.
Okay, Tony's comments checks haven't cleared then, I guess. Okay.
Wait a minute. I'm getting a push notification from my phone. I actually disagree, Brandon. No,
Did you get a PayPal?
Yeah, I just got a PayPal notice. Got a Zelle transfer.
So just so we set the table here, we'll go through some stats. I'll try to go through this quickly. So just first of all, Revolution tonight, tickets out. WrestleTix did do an update today. 8,333 is the number of tickets out for Revolution tonight in San Francisco. How does that compare to other pay-per-views, other ticket sales for other pay-per-views? Well, it's a little bit below. If that ends up being the final number, it'll be very similar to last year's Revolution, which did 8,700. But all the others are mostly, most of them have been over 10,000. We do have All Out last year in Chicago, 9,000.
And if people remember, that Revolution show last year was, I think, a pretty quick sellout in a very high secondary market price.
Orlando. Yeah.
It was a smaller venue than the Chase Center, and there was a whole thing where like the ticket brokers and stuff made out like bandits because they really underestimated the interest for a show like that.
Yeah. Of late, just Raw in Grand Rapids did 9,000. SmackDown in Washington, D.C. did 12,600 for some reference. San Francisco had Dynamite and Rampage, which the Dynamite on Wednesday did about 3,900, and the Rampage did 2,900. Same venue. No, this was Cow Palace, actually, right? And this...
Yeah.
That was both Cow Palace, right?
There were two Cow Palace shows, yep.
And then this is Chase Center. Is Cow Palace just lower capacity?
I don't think Cow Palace is that much lower capacity than the Chase Center. It's like 70 years older than the Chase Center, but I believe the buildings are roughly the same size. Chase Center is probably a little bit bigger. The Cow Palace is in Daly City, California, which is a suburb of the Bay Area.
Daly City? It's how it's spelled anyway.
Daly City, whatever.
I did that in my research. I was scraping up some data from the wehistory.com and trying to look at, like, how did Bruno draw compared to everybody else?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think how Dave pronounces it. I think he calls it Daly City, but I might be wrong. But anyway, in the Chase Center is in like downtown San Francisco. Okay. So I imagine the Chase Center is probably a little bit more accessible. It's more in the heart of the city as opposed to Daly City or the Cow Palace, which is, I think, out more in the suburbs.
So just looking at year-over-year trends so far in Q1, Dynamite is up. Going to a lot of new markets, it is up. The average attendance for Dynamite, when I say attendance, I mean tickets distributed, really, according to WrestleTix, is up 17% through the first 2 months or so of the first quarter of the year. Meanwhile, Raw is up even more, 41%, and SmackDown up 35%. So the WTV show is doing better than the AEW TV show. Now we go back a couple quarters here, and we do see that is the exception compared to the 2 quarter years before that, where Dynamite was down by double digits and Rampage was, well, at least in averages, was down by double digits. It actually, in terms of total attendance, because they ran more events, was up in Q4. You have something there?
No.
No. Okay. TV ratings. We can look at the rankings, and Dynamite, as far as being highly ranked on Wednesday, which is going to be really important when we think about its actual business, AEW's actual business and their TV rights value. Dynamite is still performing strongly among other programs in 18 to 49 on Wednesday. The line that we have here, this 13-week moving average, is pretty flat. Rampage has declined, and this is just another look at this. If we break this down into maybe a clearer view as to average it by quarter, we can get a clearer picture visually of what's happening here. And we do see, especially since I think the Wednesday Night War ends about Q2 2021, and that's where Dynamite starts consistently being at least ranked number 5, if not better. And shortly after that, Rampage starts to fall, and even in the last 2 quarters, down to averaging a rank of 25, whereas before it was in the teens or in the top 10 or so. It has continued to fall in the last 2 quarters, but Dynamite has been stable, averaging number 4 or number 3 or number 2 in each quarter of the last 2 years almost.
And that's important to keep in mind when we talk about, like you mentioned, like the actual business of things. I was thinking about the rating this week for Dynamite, where I think they did a 0.27, like a little over 800,000 viewers.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, those aren't great numbers by Dynamite standards. I think they'd be disappointed. If you were just doing a 1-week sample, I'd be disappointed. But you look at the chart and it's like, all right, well, they were third on the night. They were the only 2 things they were behind were the NBA, and they were virtually tied with one of the NBA games for second place in 18 to 49. So is the number itself not that awesome? Yeah, but you look at that ranking, it's like, well, you can't really complain that they're bigger than anything else on cable tonight except basically one NBA game. And so it's all important stuff to keep in mind with both Dynamite and Raw and WWE. WWE is obviously usually number 1, so it's less of a concern. But again, like if you're talking, even if WWE were to be down slightly, the fact that they're still number 1 every week, for the most part, is a huge thing for their business and a huge thing for how viable their appeal is to other broadcasting partners.
Yeah. And I would say that's especially the case for Dynamite. That's definitely the case for Dynamite. But for Rampage, and we may get into this later on here, but Rampage has continued to fall in its ranking, not just its viewership, which it has. This is an entire picture of Dynamite and Rampage over their entire history in the demo and total. The margin, I've liked to trot out this chart quite a bit, is the margin that WWE Raw or WWE SmackDown have over Dynamite in the demo. This is the entire history since Dynamite's been on the air, since October 2019. And SmackDown is actually almost back to where it was at the beginning of all of this. SmackDown has grown in the demo, or held up in the demo, enough that its margin is approaching more. It is already more than doubling Dynamite in the demo, but now it's almost 125% greater than Dynamite in the demo, which is, they're almost there, which is where it was back in like early 2020, late 2019, when Dynamite had only been on the air for a few months at that point. If you look at year-over-year trends, Dynamite is down 8% in this quarter to date. Rampage is down 15% in this quarter to date. And we have to go back to Q1 2022 to find a quarter where Dynamite was still posting a positive difference on average year over year. And as we know, Rampage started out strong in Q3 2021 and has continued to show declines year over year since then. Meanwhile, if you're interested, WWE is doing fairly well, up 5% Raw, up 8% SmackDown in this quarter to date. The trends, now that was total viewership. The demo, which is what we've been told really matters and does matter to advertisers and is a leading indicator on what the future of TV viewership is going to be like. Dynamite is down even worse in the demo, as this metric tends to be more negative because we've got younger viewers in here. But Dynamite is down 22% quarter to date. Rampage is down 38% quarter to date. And Raw and SmackDown and NXT all positive. Raw up 12% in the quarter to date. So that's TV ratings, which is really the most important thing to this business because the biggest piece of its revenue is media. The biggest media deal it has is in the US. That's the viewership we're looking at here. Google Trends, which have been a reliable leading indicator when you look at it over the long course of time in terms of telling you something about how other consumer metrics are going to behave. We've got AEW in February. The month just ended. So we've got February data that's brand new. How exciting. Down 33% compared to last year's February. January, the same. Meanwhile, Raw is up 10 or 9% in those 2 months. NXT is up as well. New Japan is way up, doing better than it was in the year prior where they were dealing with more pandemic restrictions. Impact is down. Stardom is flattening out, it looks like. Noah is way up, thanks to Kiji Muto, maybe. I don't know if there's anything else terribly interesting to look at here. Moving on to just look at
You're just going to gloss over CMLL being up so much?
CMLL. Tell me about CMLL. How's it going in Arena Mexico?
CMLL's gotten their stuff together after a pretty miserable last few years, and they're doing like tremendous business. I think they're selling over 10,000 tickets a lot of nights on Friday nights to Arena Mexico. They've got stars actually drawing. They got Mystico. Mystico's back and humming.
Mystico?
Like
the
Sin Cara, yeah.
Uribe Mystico?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, wow. He's
a big star again.
Since his induction to the Hall of Fame, that's really caused the resurgence.
Yeah, I think it put him over the top personally.
So what name is he using now?
He's back being Mystico.
Okay, he's not like Caristico or Mystices.
No, he's not. I think they finally figured out all of the various legal entrapments. They got rid of the other guy that was pretending to be
Mystico
AAA Mystico, right?
Yeah, no, it's the good old days. The glory days are here again. Okay. Mystico is back and he's headlining CMLL. They've got Atlantis Jr., who they spent a lot of time and effort to kind of make into a new star. Kind of pushed him before. I think a lot of people were ready, but he's kind of hitting his stride as an antagonist. And that's the old standbys. Templario, Volador Jr., Ultimo Guerrero, Hechicero. CMLL is back, baby.
Okay.
Look at that Google trend. Look at that January Google trend number.
Yeah,
up 60% year over year.
29 in February. MLW is up a little bit, maybe for being on Reels.
All Japan Pro Wrestling also back. Yuji Nagata,
yes,
Triple Crown champion.
We're going to get sidetracked here. But I am now, as of yesterday, a Stardom World subscriber. I watched my first Stardom matches yesterday. I watched the Siri versus Julia match from December. Clap crowd. I was not expecting that, but it was good. But look forward to watching some matches with non-clap crowd. AEW. Just looking at the AEW trend, and it peaks as you would expect around the debut of Punk and the arrival of Daniel Bryan, Adam Cole in September, and then it has normalized in the months after that, and then it's a negative slope from there. It's kind of back to the point where it was in maybe you could say 2019, or really this entire timeline of 2019, 2020 when it was at sort of this same level in terms of web search. This is worldwide. We could look at YouTube too for another indicator of popularity and fan interest. And AEW is doing 50 million YouTube views on it. This is its entire channel, every video by month, doing 50 million. But look at this year over year, and it's down a little bit in January. It's down 14% in February, and it has been down since August when it was being compared to that CM Punk debut month. But it's been down every month since then. Pay-per-view, All Out. This is with Punk. We don't really have any post-Punk numbers to look at here, but All Out would be down from the prior year's All Out, which is the all-time high for AEW. I believe Full Gear did substantially less this year than the full year of the prior year. And I expect we'll see. And you guys have predicted, I should say, that Revolution will not do the reported 175,000 buys that it did last year. Is it actually down? Is fan interest in AEW actually down? I think the answer is yes. I mean, you got TV ratings are down. Okay, Dynamite's rank is strong, and that means probably pretty strong TV rights value. But that can't say that for Rampage. Rampage's rank is way down. The viewership is down for both Dynamite and for Rampage. Not shown here. The audience has gotten older too over this time. The median age has. Ticket sales doing better in this quarter, going to all these new markets, but in these previous quarters where they've been revisiting a lot of markets, attendance has been down. Web search is down. YouTube is down. The answer is yes. And now we will have a discussion. Why? Why is AEW fan interest down? As we all know, it's probably the blood. It's probably AEW not attracting the casual fan. It's probably the excuses that you could roll out here is the cord cutting. Well, wait a minute. I got this last year. It's WrestleMania season. You can't expect AEW to be popular during WWE's strongest season of the year. I don't think that holds up. This is everything is down year over year. Whatever headwind you faced, if there is any from WrestleMania, you could make an opposite argument and say that should lift all boats. Whatever is happening because of WrestleMania is happening this year because of WrestleMania, and things year over year in January and February are down. TV ratings, web search, YouTube. So why is AEW not as popular with fans as it was a year ago, or whatever arbitrary timeline you want to draw?
The obvious thing is that CM Punk was a legitimate difference maker within the company and helped. I think if AEW was introduced at a certain fan level, like if you look at like quarter 4 of 2019 or quarter 1 of 2020, that's kind of your core audience, for lack of a better term. And then CM Punk and his presence was able to build a new audience or increase the amount of viewers that were regularly tuning into the show or buying tickets or buying pay-per-views or searching for it on Google Trends or any of the metrics that we just ran through that have been down since Punk left.
And
Punk
Punk's
leaves
debut
and
is right here for people watching on YouTube, this huge Rampage debut.
And Punk leaves, and not only does he not only is he just like not on the show, but he goes out in this spectacular fireball crash where he buries everyone in the company on the way out. Probably it wasn't intentionally supposed to be his exit, but ended up basically being his exit from the company for now. And they don't have that person anymore to drive business forward. And wrestling is always in a lot of ways a business that is relying on those singular stars to get over and to be big stars, and AEW hasn't been able to replace Punk. Mm-hmm. And that would be the number one thing if I were to look at a lot of these metrics. A lot of them correspond with Punk not being around. Mm-hmm. And so that's the obvious, just at a first glance. I think there's more under the surface of that. But if you were to ask me, like, what is your one take on that? I think that's the obvious one, correct?
Yeah, I agree. Punk. Maybe Cody's a factor too.
Cody was a big star. I mean, you lose someone who, I don't know if Cody wasn't, you can't like necessarily look at Cody's presence and say that he was this huge quarter-hour draw or he was this huge, when Cody was in a big match on pay-per-view, he did super well compared to his peers. But Cody was definitely one of like the 5 biggest stars in the company and certainly had a lot of fans. And him leaving and going to WWE, obviously, that's not a good thing that happened for AEW.
I think Cody has clearly added a lot to WWE. He's been a difference maker, at least in a short period of time here for WWE. And I mean, we're seeing this now since he's been returned from injury. But before his injury, I saw this in quarter hours too. Now, some of this is just novelty that you see with anybody's debut or return.
Right. And they're jumping him into a big storyline. And WWE's done a really good job with Cody since he came in. Since they presented him as a star, they've hyped him up. They've had him all over their shows when he's been healthy. I think him missing time in a lot of ways was a blessing because it allowed him to basically skip like 8 months of the year, so he could then pop up right in time for a big run from the Royal Rumble into WrestleMania, which is kind of the like most lucrative time to be perceived as a big star before maybe he gets a little bit stale or the novelty wears off.
But so I think Cody, I don't think Cody would be adding to AEW what he's adding to WWE right now, even if you like adjust that for scale, whatever, if you know what I mean there. Because part of what's making Cody special in WWE right now is the novelty of him returning and whatever that story is about, And I don't just mean like the storyline story, but him coming back and seeing what his return to the company is going to be like. I think is a special kind of attraction that is sort of by definition not the same in AEW.
Right.
Is Cody part of a bigger part of like the goodwill of AEW to wrestling fans wearing off? Like you have a founder of the company pretty much leaving, and it's like, oh, he left. Punk shows up, but then Punk leaves and not on good terms, and the EVPs are involved and all that, and just overall with the like, it's not in Ring of Honor being heavily involved in television. I feel like if you were an organic AEW fan, everything that got you in there is gone.
I don't know if everything,
not everything, but a lot of it.
But I think you're definitely right, Chris. Like the two things, Cody leaving and then Punk not only leaving but basically killing the perception of the company on his way out. I think both hurt the idea that AEW is the fun, cool place to be, and
he hasn't been like buried in the booking immediately, and at this point at all. He's been pushed. He's gonna main event WrestleMania.
Cody in WWE.
Yes.
Yeah, I think from an AEW perspective, like what Gullo was saying, like the image of AEW being like this cool functioning place where like guys work together and things like that, which was part of the fan appeal at first for at least some fans, maybe not all of them. That's gone, and I think like Punk's not only like it's not just Punk no longer being around, but the way Punk exited and the perception hit that it took, that it gave AEW, it led credence to all of the thought that Tony Khan is out of his depth as a leader of a professional wrestling company, that the EVPs are not on the ball and not doing a good job because Punk called them out and said they weren't. All of that, and then never really having a public thorough explanation of what happened there and what's going on with Punk. And Tony might have his reasons for very valid reasons for not doing that, but the fact is that we never got that. I think that impacted business a lot. I think that impacted the perception of the company. I think if like we're talking about AEW in general, I think like, and if we're going to talk about them in their relationship with WWE, I think they've lost a PR war with WWE in the sense of like what company appears to be a functioning entity and what company is all over the place. Because despite the fact of all of the stuff that's happened with Vince and WWE and leadership in WWE over the last year, it's AEW that's the company that's believed to be a mess. It's AEW that's got a person running the show that doesn't know what they're doing. It's AEW with ineffective, vice presidents, as opposed to WWE being the company with vice presidents who are being fired for HR violations. All of this stuff plays into, I think, the perception of AEW taking a hit. And that leads to maybe some fans who were sampling the product because of CM Punk, fans who were maybe only invested in one or two stars, and maybe those two stars were CM Punk and Cody. Those fans now are kind of like, you know what, I'm not going to give this company as much of my time and as much as my financial investment in them because it is a clown show, and all this stuff that I'm hearing on social media, it's kind of become true in a way. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. Part of this thing, as I would say, part of it is mistakes AEW has made and trends that exist in AEW that are maybe turnoffs to some of these fans. And also part of it is just messaging from whether it's people on social media who are WWE trolls, WWE friendly media partners, people spreading out the message of AEW's inferiority has played a role in hurting AEW's image. And I think they've lost that. And it's going to take some time to build that back up and get it right.
Yeah, to add on to what you're saying, and then I want to bring up another point. Add on what you're saying. It's not, and those are the big stories, right? But we're not also talking about the Kingston Sammy altercation, Andrade, Miro being vocal about his spot, FTR being very vocal about their spot, like all things that just aren't good PR. But let me bring up another thing too. Obviously, Triple H has taken over creative, and now that's an alternative to people that maybe have gotten burned out from the AEW product, or maybe it's a little stale to them. And I kind of buy into the opinion that a good booker lasts about 3 years, and then they start to kind of burn out. If you look over pro wrestling's history, the best bookers have had 3 great years, and then it dies down.
Shohei Bob, I think, had 5 at least, though. Shohei Bob was special. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, Dusty's
Mushnick
runs, Kevin Sullivan, Vince Russo.
Right.
Yeah, like.
Right. A lot of these, like most bookers don't last, decades in the chair. So, and I think
just on that point, I think in this recent history of wrestling, I think of these alternative brands that have had success in the last 8 years or so, and it's New Japan with Gato, and that's when would you start the clock there? 2013 or something like that, and I would say to maybe 18 or 19, and that's like a good 5-year run. I would say NXT from 2014 to 2018, it's like a good 4-year run. Maybe AEW from 2019 to 2021 or something like that. It's a good 3-year run. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am of the belief that I don't have a problem with AEW's booking in a lot of ways. I think that I'm excited for the show tonight. I think a lot of the storylines have been well done to get us to this point. I think the Hangman Page Moxley storyline is strong. I think the MJF Danielson storyline is strong. I think the Christian versus Jungle Boy storyline is strong. I am not of the belief that like the booking is a lot worse than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. I think there's an issue with star power. And okay, is star power a reflection of booking? It is and it isn't. CM Punk really wasn't a big star in AEW in the first place because of Tony Khan's booking. It was because he already was a big star. And it takes a long time for somebody to build up that kind of star power. It takes years of someone to be a big star to come across like that. And it's possible that the wrestling industry is never going to make a star as big as CM Punk ever again. That's a possibility.
So, at least in terms of critical reception, we have some cage match data that tells you if this is any kind of indication about how at least hardcore fans are feeling about it. I mean, Dynamite's event ratings in Q1 are, am I right here, at an all-time high. Rampage is close to its high in terms of its average event rating on Cage Match, for what that's worth, but it's not like people are panning these shows generally. And it's not because of the match quality. I counted up the number of matches on Dynamite and Rampage that had at least an 8.0 rating. And in Q1 to date, with one more month still to go, it's tied the all-time high, which was just in Q3 of last year at 12 matches here. So there's a lot of what are being perceived by cage match voters as high-quality matches. So it's not seemingly the critical quality of the show.
I think people have looked at the numbers going down and have used that in some ways to justify whatever their criticisms of AEW as being more serious. And I think, and there's some validity to that. But when I think about the show, I'm not like, man, this show is, I was getting a little bit burned out, I would say, towards in Q4 last year. I was getting a little nervous about some of the things that were happening. But I think since 2023 has started, I think the show has been really strong. And obviously that's reflected like in the cage match data you just suggested. But I do think that there is an issue with star power. And I think there's an issue with the broader perception of the company amongst maybe this group of 200,000 fans who maybe tune into Dynamite one week and maybe don't. And I think without CM Punk and with the perception of being the company as being disorganized and the perception of the company as being this place that doesn't tell stories and this place where Tony just puts out good matches or whatever kind of thing that people say about it, I think that's hurt them kind of getting that swing audience that exists for them week to week. I mean, we saw it the last 3 weeks, right? With the 200,000 viewers that didn't tune in 3 weeks ago when the NBA was on, the Challenge was on, and AEW did a 0.27. And then 2 weeks ago, when there was very little competition for Dynamite, a lot more people tuned in, 0.35, biggest rating, I think, of the year, biggest total viewer number of the year, over 1 million viewers.
Yeah.
And then when there was a little more competition this week, they went right back down. And so you can see there's a swing audience there that at this point in time, AEW has got to cultivate into more weekly viewers if they want to go back up and they want to reverse some of these negative trends. What will it take? Will it take a really hot storyline? Will it take the return of CM Punk? Is it impossible? We don't know. We shall see.
I guess.
I mean, Punk and FTR versus the Elite would be probably the thing to kind of get business
if
back.
CM Punk
if
comes back, that's going to be big business. Yeah. I mean, that would get everyone talking. It would help change the perception of like that AEW is this disaster of a company, because if they're able to get CM Punk back on track, FTR can get in the bin. I don't really care about them at all. But CM Punk coming back. No, like FTR, like Dax and his podcast and his, the work in this angle where the company doesn't like him, and he's got all these mutant fans that hate the Young Bucks, and this whole me versus the company angle, like that's something CM Punk can do. It's not something you can do, pal. They come back and they can do a trios battle with the Elite. That's fine, but like I don't think they're like big needle movers in this regard.
So I think there's one thing we can separate here. I think there's two things happening, and they're both happening that WWE's momentum has improved, and I should mention, we're getting quite for us a big live audience here, and I did go back and listen to a little bit of our podcast from 6 months ago where we started to talk about how just after Triple H had taken over, we had about one month of data behind us, and we did I think the title of the episode is, has the momentum shifted between WWE and AEW, and I think that is when it happened in August of last year. So that's happening still. We're still seeing some pretty favorable year-over-year trends for WWE. That's happening.
How closely do you really think the two are related?
And the fact that AEW has diminished, I think they are related, and I think there's things happening independently within both companies. Certainly within both. Well, certainly WWE is doing better, and that's independent of AEW, I guess. The only way it's really their positive momentum has been intertwined with AEW is maybe something like getting Cody, and that being an interesting dynamic. But I think there's a lot of lost opportunity for AEW if WWE is good. If more people are perceiving WWE as a good product and are satisfied with it, there's less need for AEW. I believe one person created AEW, and his last name is not Khan. His last name is McMahon. I think Vince McMahon created the opportunity that allowed the AEW opportunity to exist by creating a product that caused a lot of fans to be dissatisfied, and not just fans, talent too. So you created you primed an audience, a talent set, to be ready for somebody else, which it was kind of unlikely that such a person would exist, who had access to a lot of money and access to media distribution deals, which ended up being Tony Khan. So I do think these things are intertwined somewhat.
I think, but do you think so? 4 years into AEW's existence, where they have cultivated a fan base that at one point was watching weekly on a regular basis, those fans, there's a sizable portion of fans who just abandoned the product on a regular basis because they felt that WWE got better. Were there fans who just stopped watching WWE in like the last year of Vince McMahon's reign in creative, and started watching AEW regularly because like, I'm sick of WWE, time to watch AEW, not watching Raw and SmackDown anymore, watching Dynamite. And then when Triple H came back into power and AEW wobbled a bit, those same fans were like, all right, I don't need to watch Dynamite anymore because Raw and SmackDown are great again. And they flipped back.
Yeah. And not zero sum. It's not necessarily zero sum, right?
Right, but that's the general theme. I kind of think AEW's fan base, maybe. I mean, the numbers. It would be coincidental. It would be very coincidental if AEW goes down and WWE goes up, and for that to just them to have nothing to do with one another. But I just my perception is that what AEW does from a product standpoint, and how it compares to WWE shouldn't really impact the audience
They're
that much. I think
they're in different businesses. WWE is in the entertainment business, and AEW is in the wrestling business.
I just think AEW,
and those
to
are
me,
two
like
completely different philosophies.
I think like if you're an AEW fan and you enjoyed what AEW was doing, you wouldn't just stop watching because WWE was doing a little bit better. You maybe your time would be divided a little bit, but you would still be interested in AEW if AEW still held your interest. I think AEW not having CM Punk, not having as much star power, and taking the perception hit that caused, hurt them. To like would hurt them, and it's kind of like WWE caught back on. I think WWE's business since Triple H back took over is interesting. If you just look at the trends a little bit, it's like there's a huge amount of interest when he takes over right away. It starts to drift a little bit back down to normal a few months in, and then the Sammy bloodline stuff really takes off. Cody comes back, which helps, and then you're on the road to WrestleMania, and business goes right back up.
SmackDown on Friday, I haven't written a report about it, but based on the Fast affiliate, it looks like the final is going to be around 2.4 million again.
Mm-hmm. So they're settled. They seem to be settling in, at least the last month or so, around that number.
So it doesn't lend credence to the notion that having Sami Zayn lose at Elimination Chamber is killing the business or something like that. That the audience that was there before Elimination Chamber is still there.
I think that will take months for us to really understand. A lot of it depends on how they handle Sammy over the next month or two.
Okay, so I think when we compare WWE and AEW, I think there are obviously some big differences. One of them with WWE is around WWE's having existed and been a dominant brand in pro wrestling for decades, and it's sort of like it's a huge advantage for WWE. You compare it to look at Twitter that has it's been an incredibly dysfunctional platform for the last 6 months or so, or whatever it is. And you've seen these other alternatives try to pop up, like Mastodon or Post News, and I don't know that anybody's using them. And I've thought about it, Twitter has existed for so long at this point, and it was so much earlier to the game. Even though, yes, Twitter only like a fraction of people in the United States are ever really using Twitter, but nonetheless, it has existed for so long and has built up this user base that it's really hard to catch up with. And I think that's an analogy with WWE and other pro wrestling brands. It's just really hard to get into that market share because they've spent so much time building up that market share. And I think it's a similar conversation that we've had on air as well as off air about wrestlers who've just been around for a long time and are now older wrestlers. And it's so hard to become a new star that holds a candle to these stars who have existed since, let's say, the cable TV era. So there's things like that. And then there's worldwide distribution and distribution on different forms of media. AEW is still working on its worldwide distribution. They just made a TV deal in Australia. Now, that doesn't explain why popularity has diminished, but it does start to explain why the gap between AEW and WWE is there. And I think not only geography, but in my opinion, two events that have helped WWE grow its popularity over the last 10 years had little to do with star power and had much more to do with streaming distribution in the form of WWE Network in 2014 and then Peacock in 2021. And the point is, AEW doesn't have any streaming distribution.
But isn't this all just arguments for why it's kind of absurd to compare the two companies? Because WWE has this 50 or 60 year head start in this massive infrastructure, like something like international distribution.
I don't think it's absurd to compare them. It's an explanation for why the gap is what it is.
Right, but when we're talking about the gap, like at the end of the day, was WWE's 13 times bigger than AEW, roughly?
In
based on
in terms of revenue, I think AEW probably made $100 million and
right. We don't
WWE made
we don't
1.3
know.
billion.
Yeah, we don't know AEW's revenue number, but it's a dozen times larger than them. So
Yeah.
in WWE has this massive head start. I think a huge advantage for, like, if we're going to talk about, let's talk about quarter 1 this year, or let's talk about January and February, like the year-over-the-year trends. Like you showed up earlier, like Dynamite and Rampage are down significantly. Raw and SmackDown are seeing some good positive trends year over year. One of the major reasons for that is because WWE has this institutional existence where two things happened for WWE this year, especially Raw. You see Raw's up 12% year over year, quarter 1, 2023.
This is in the demo, yeah.
Right. Raw had its 30th anniversary show, which did a gigantic number. And that had, because they had fans from who maybe haven't watched Raw in a couple of years tune in. And wisely, WWE used that time to really push a major angle that they were doing that was starting to get over, which was the Bloodline angle with Sami and Roman Reigns and the Usos. And people are into that. It came across really well on that episode of Raw 30, and that, those 2.x amount of million viewers who watched Raw 30, they were like, hey, maybe I'll tune in. Maybe I'll keep watching this. And that's just a massive institutional advantage that, like, Dynamite's not going to have. They can't have the 30th anniversary of Dynamite and have fans who haven't watched Dynamite in years just tune in out of curiosity. That's just something that is totally outside of AEW's ability to generate. WWE also has the Royal Rumble, an annual event that often has, outside of WrestleMania, probably the most viewed WWE event on pay-per-view. It's something that a lot of fans who watch one WWE event a year will watch because it's kind of a traditional thing. It's easy to watch without really understanding the product that closely. And what do they do at the Royal Rumble? They heavily push Sami and the Bloodline angle, and they heavily push Cody. Again, two contemporary acts that were starting to get over within the current existing fan base. And again, I think they've seen positive benefits from using that time when they were in front of this very large audience that they're normally not in front of, pushing regular acts, something they haven't done in the past. Usually they try to push nostalgia acts. And I think that has really helped Raw and SmackDown, and it's really helped Cody and Sami Zayn and this whole thing come across as a bigger deal, and helped really push business forward. And now Sami can be on house shows, and they're doing good business and things like that. Again, all things that AEW can't do. They don't have the institutional backbone to bring fans who haven't watched for decades back with special events. And WWE really did a great job capitalizing on that earlier this year. And that's why it's like, if I'm going to compare, like, how come WWE's been able to get back up year-over-year trends while AEW has fallen off? Yeah, there's a lot of explanations for why, but a huge reason is just WWE's playing on a different playing field where they have millions of fans who are out there that used to watch their show that don't, and they can be brought back for certain major things. AEW is just not going to have that kind of institutional capacity. And so it makes it very difficult to kind of compare, like, why is WWE up and AEW's down? It's because their business models and their existence is so entirely different.
AEW has a huge advantage in a lot of ways, just because it has existed as a very highly recognized brand for so long. So those are things that I don't know if AEW can, like, ever catch up with WWE on. Certainly they can make progress with international distribution. Certainly they can get distributed on and streaming. And I think that if there's a way, I mean, I do see if CM Punk comes back to AEW, there being a positive short-term results for AEW that way. But I see another way being if they get some sort of streaming distribution that's comparable to the effects that WWE benefited from if they got when they got streaming distribution, either through the network or through Peacock. And it's plausible to see how that would play out. It would be, I guess, an AEW pay-per-view deal or some sort of deal that puts AEW content on a meaningful streaming platform that allows it to reach more people. And that's something we talked about when speculating about what's AEW's next media deal going to be. And I've talked about maybe Rampage is well suited for a streaming platform. I guess it still could be. I see some real value lost in Rampage over the last couple quarters. I mean, just based on the rankings data that we had on the screen a little while ago. in terms of the big lesson from 2018. A moment that inspired Tony Khan to start AEW because he saw the huge deal that WWE got for TV rights. The lesson there was that, yes, Raw got a big upgrade, but so did SmackDown. And SmackDown was able to be split off into its own deal. And WWE made a lot more money because of that, because SmackDown was strengthened. SmackDown was kind of a glorified B show. If you go back to like 2014.
It definitely was.
And they did this brand split, which I as a fan hate, but that doesn't matter. It helps the ratings of SmackDown, and SmackDown was able to be sold separately to Fox. If you had a Dynamite that could be sold over here and a Rampage that could be sold over there, that's a great financial situation for AEW if you've got two really strong TV brands. But Rampage has really fallen from that level of value. We've argued before why I think NXT is probably not a very valuable brand because it doesn't rank that highly. It is doing better lately, but it's still not ranking that highly. So I don't see NXT as being this big TV rights brand. Likewise, I don't see Rampage being the TV rights brand that it looked like it might have been in late 2021 or even maybe early 2022. It has really fallen off in terms of value.
Yeah, I think if Rampage, if we go back in time,
and why has that happened?
If we go back in time,
because of Ring of Honor distraction.
That's probably a factor. I think with Rampage, let's go back in time, right? Let's go back to let's just talk about AEW's 2022, where for a lot of different reasons, they had issues with star power being all active at once at the same time. So CM Punk, who's the company's biggest star, he's around for like the first half of 2022, but then he gets injured. He's off TV for a little bit. Then he comes back very briefly, to win the title again and All Out, but then he's gone again. So you lose CM Punk. When did Jon Moxley return? He was out for at least the first month of like 2022, or did he come back before then?
Keep talking, I'll look it up.
But so Moxley misses, I think, a little bit of time. The Elite Kenny Omega is out for 6 months at least.
January 2022, he came back from rehab.
I feel like that sounds about right. Like maybe February, but
I'm seeing articles from January 20th.
Okay. So Kenny Omega misses 6 months. Cody leaves the company, so he's gone after March. The Young Bucks and Kenny were suspended after All Out, so they missed more time. Hangman was out with an injury. MJF was gone from the company for a few months because maybe they were doing an angle, who knows. And so I think Bryan Danielson missed time right around the spring and summer, like right around Forbidden Door. Adam Cole is been out for a long time. And so if you were to look at AEW, like who is their star power? Who are kind of like the big stars that you can put on Rampage each week? When you have a shorter depth of stars at your disposal, then I feel like Tony prioritized Dynamite. So it's like if we only have 3 or 4 really big stars, they've all got to be on Dynamite because Dynamite is the A show. And then so Rampage went through this whole phase where it really suffered, where it didn't really feel like you had to tune in, didn't really feel like any major angles were going to be shot, didn't really feel like there was going to be any big stars or any big matches that you wanted to see. And so Rampage became this show that you could easily dismiss, which was always a danger because of its time slot, where it was going to be on during a time where a lot of people who would be watching are occupied doing something else Friday night at 10 p.m. And so it became easy to dismiss Rampage. And even as, the roster's gotten healthier and they've had more stars at their disposal to put on Rampage, the branding is over. Rampage is a skippable show. And even now, most major angles tend to happen on Dynamite. Like Rampage this week, which was a live Rampage, they had the Dustin Rhodes and Keith Lee and Swerve kind of angle as kind of like the main event thing, but that's a mid-card angle, and I liked it, but it's a mid-card angle. It's not a top star angle, and it's something that you don't really have to tune into. It's not like they did the MJF Bryan Danielson go home segment for the pay-per-view on Rampage. They did it on Dynamite. They did the Moxley Hangman go home angle on Dynamite, not on Rampage. They did the Christian and Jungle Boy angle. They did that on Dynamite, not on Rampage. Rampage was this B show that you didn't really have to watch. But I think that time period where they really didn't have any star power created the perception that Rampage was skippable, and it's very difficult to shake that. And unless you just started throwing out, world title matches on Rampage or major blow off to feud matches on Rampage, you're not going to build that perception back up. And right now, I think the priority is still, we got to make sure Dynamite is as strong as possible. So I think it's become very difficult for AEW to make Rampage feel important. And maybe they should have prioritized it more, like you said, Brandon. Maybe the value of having these two strong different brands is worth, Dynamite maybe being a little less strong because more priority is given to Rampage in terms of star power and time to major angles. Maybe that was a better idea, but I think they had to make a choice one way or the other. And they had to choose. They chose Dynamite. They chose to beef Dynamite as much as possible. And Rampage has now become this very skippable show.
Yeah, in terms of rating, it's performing more like shoulder content rather than core content, to put it in a sort of WWE financial reporting terminology. And I think there's other issues that could be improved that I don't think will be improved. And I think it's largely around Tony's management, in that I think Ring of Honor has been a major distraction for AEW. I think it's contributed to the decline of Rampage. I don't know how much it's affected the production of AEW itself, but I think it's contributed to the loss of value in Rampage. And I think, like a lot of wrestling companies, these wrestling companies become sort of a manifestation of the eccentricities of their chief executive. And I think when it comes to AEW's brand, they still have a strong quality product, at least in ring. Hardcore fans still seem to like it according to these cage match ratings. I think other things that determine the value or the perception of your brand are communication and behavior. And I think in communication, it's okay. And in terms of like Tony's messaging and how he hypes the product, sometimes the promise exceeds the performance. In terms of, there's another big announcement. Have you heard? There's another big announcement coming up from Tony. I think seriously, he said that there will be another huge announcement.
Isn't that par for the course for a promoter though? Like, a promoter is always going to be
everybody's doing it, so it's okay.
Yeah,
but a wrestling promoter and a company is always going to be a little bit more enthusiastic about what's going to happen than what ends up happening. That's
just in the context of Rampage. Tony Khan said this is not a B show. I think he corrected someone on a media call who dared to call Rampage a B show. And it's just
and at first
a
that was true.
messaging that doesn't reflect reality to me.
Well, at first that was true. Remember, Rampage was like the CM Punk show. Remember when CM Punk was like only on Rampage, like his first month in the company?
Yeah, it was a wonderful fall.
So when Tony Khan corrected that reporter, which if I remember is I think even before Rampage's debut was when he said that in his mind he was right, that we're taking this extremely seriously, but as time goes on, stuff happens. You end up having to choose between Dynamite or Rampage, and he chose Dynamite.
Okay, so that's communication. That's not the stronger point. I think the stronger point is with behavior of your talent and your leadership. And I think the all-out presser was a huge moment for that, to show that Tony didn't have strong command and control of his talent. And it's not an easy task to manage all this talent who are very ambitious and have big egos and who have to cooperate with each other in a locker room. And I think his tweets, too, have been unbecoming of a strong leader and a window into maybe some impulsive judgment in terms of his tweets towards Ariel Helwani, or his tweets towards Big Swole, or his tweets about Fox News, and claiming that there's an army of bots coming after AEW. These are things that have happened over the years. And, I think, I think he likes people too. That's why he signed all this talent. He really wants to get everybody in there, and he clearly has like a genuine affinity for pro wrestlers and pro wrestling. And I think that results in these pay-per-views going as long as they do, and Dynamite feeling as rushed as it does to some people. And I don't see any of these problems getting corrected, because I think it's really important to Tony to be seen as, Booker of the Year as this great promoter, great booker. So, I mean, I don't see that ambition changing. So I don't see the results changing in a way that would actually benefit the company.
Very, very similar to your thoughts on WWE.
In what way?
In the sense that Vince is the problem, and Vince is never going to go away, which Vince maybe has gone away, but it's the same idea, right? Which is that
NWE has improved,
business-wise. If I feel like the problem is at the top,
I think I remember having conversations with people who are like, well, the leader always gets too much credit and too much blame, and I think I've wrestled with that, and I still agree with myself that I think in wrestling at least. And Chris Gullo, I think this is true for indie wrestling too. The company is overwhelmingly influenced by its main leader, and whether or not this person is managing people well, and the people who work for that person trusts that person, and not that I don't think people don't trust. I think talent generally and people who work with Tony Khan like him, but do they? I don't want to say fear him, but do they like? Do they trust him as being like a wise leader who they take seriously, and who they will listen to? I mean, that press conference is an extreme example in the opposite.
Yeah.
Do they have faith in him being a critical
word.
decision maker, and do they have faith in his ability to solve problems?
Yeah,
it goes back to the Cody thing. How do you let Cody walk out, a founder of the company? Like, if you're an employee of AEW, you really question that. Like,
I mean that case in particular, we don't. They have both apparently sworn to secrecy with each other. I don't know what the whole story is there, and I think certainly in hindsight, Cody made the right decision.
Yeah, but if you're just an employee that doesn't know the story, and you're like, wow, if you work for a company and one of the top, executives leaves, people start to talk, and that's at any company in any type of field.
Maybe some people know why Cody left. It's a mystery to us, but I don't know. Do you think that AEW and Tony Khan are also held to a different standard than WWE as an upstart brand?
To people like us, or like to the people
not
who
just to
who
people like us,
commentate on
but
wrestling?
you talked about like the public perception of Tony Khan, right? The perception
that I think does
of
bleed into
Khan, his conduct on social media, his public, he's hyping up things too much.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a standard that maybe WWE isn't held to as closely because WWE is such an established brand and such an established product, and people already kind of assume, like I get the sense that everyone assumes that WWE is just full of BS all the time anyway, so the standard isn't as high. But Tony Khan gives off the impression of like trying to be like not a carny and being more trustworthy than your typical traditional pro wrestling promoter, and he tries to be as transparent. He gives off the impression that he's trying to be as transparent as possible. So there's this idea that Tony is held to like a higher standard of
maybe
both like management and transparency.
Maybe it's just like any relationship, though. I haven't given a lot of thought. So are there examples of things that W has done recently that, like, if AEW did that, it would be a bigger deal.
Yes.
Maybe let's assume that's true. Yeah, I suppose if you expect I have a relationship with someone here who I know is going to say misleading and weird things, and maybe I have a better relationship with somebody over there. But regardless, when that relationship starts to deteriorate, that's noteworthy, I guess, right? Does that answer that address the question?
I think that WWE is able to. I think AEW is hit with, because of different perception aspects of it, and definitely part of it is a WWE friendly media environment. That WWE is able to skate on things that Tony isn't. I think if AEW had to, let's say, their head of talent relations and another vice president were gone from the company due to, in John Laurinaitis' case, sexual misconduct allegations, and in Kimball's case, HR violations, that there'd be a lot more questions asked about that within AEW's backstage environment than there is in WWE, which appears to be about none. For one, I think if Tony Khan had to step down from his position amongst numerous allegations, and that he had paid women millions of dollars for alleged sexual misconduct, that whoever were to inherit Tony Khan's position would be asked a lot more about it than Triple H would.
You wouldn't be tweeting "Thank you, Tony Khan" if that happened.
No, I mean, but I'm saying, like, there's definitely, I think, a different standard in play, and part of that is because Tony has chosen to make himself a very public figure when it comes to promoting everything and doing all that, and is very media friendly and will do anyone's show if they ask him to, for the most part, in a way where WWE is way more carefully calculated in the media that they work with, and the Triple H is very calculated in the interviews he does, which are mostly only with paid employees. And Nick Khan is very well connected.
They would argue, like W would argue, perhaps that some of that just has to do with the stature of our brands. We're such a big brand and we're so in demand that we have to be more selective. Where that kid can do whatever he wants.
I don't care what they argue. I'm just saying this is the reality of the perception of things.
There's some truth to that, I guess. That
Tony has had to hustle, and Tony has had to hustle because he doesn't have the established brand, which again goes back to the institutional differences between the company and the legacies of the two respective companies, and why it's hard to compare. I don't disagree with you at all when it comes to like some of maybe the damage that Tony has done to the company, because he has been so active and out in front and visible in all of this, and some of the decisions he's made and some of the tweets that he's made. The Ariel Helwani tweet, like I don't disagree with Tony, but I wouldn't have made that tweet if I was Tony, just because Ariel has no problem rolling in the muck, so I wouldn't go down there and join him.
And you notice all these tweets have hashtag AEW Rampage or something like that.
Right.
I think that
if you go back to the Swole, right. If you go back to the Swole tweet, one of the major problems with the Swole tweet was that he like tagged a bunch of wrestlers in the tweet that he sent to Swole, which was not good. But
I mean, there was a good run where, like, if it was Friday afternoon, you knew he was going to say something very interesting on Twitter just to promote Rampage.
Yeah. Is that all?
We have a ton of super chats related to this topic, though.
All right.
So
we will do them.
Yeah, we'll just clear them down here. Sajizzle asks, says FTR were quarter-hour draws, and the Elite weren't.
So take that.
We have here MJ. Let's see here. When you guys are kind of talking about injuries and stuff, if Josh Allen got hurt and the Bills lost a few games, would you question if the Bills sucked, or assume they'll be back with a top star healthy?
Chris Gullo, I think that's one you would have to address.
Yeah, I mean, I would think they would suck in that moment that Josh Allen wasn't the quarterback, but I would have optimism about the future. If that's
can someone decode MJ? What is the analogy that he's?
He's talking about like CM Punk isn't around AEW.
Yeah.
So why are we questioning the CM Punk ratings? Why are we questioning Dynamite's ratings being bad or worse when CM Punk isn't around? Because
is CM Punk as important to AEW as Josh Allen is to the Bills?
It's a different thing, because we're talking about a competitive sport.
But they are the most important players on the respective teams.
Yes, but I wouldn't say so, because yes, AEW took a drop without Punk. But if Josh Allen were to get hurt and miss the whole season, the Bills probably wouldn't even make the playoffs.
Right, and the big thing is that in wrestling, in football, the Bills would have very limited ability to replace Josh Allen. They'd have to go with a backup who is obviously going to be significantly worse than one of the best quarterbacks in the league, as opposed to in wrestling, AEW has theoretically had 8 months to create something that's a hot angle that can kind of replace the value CM Punk brought, and they haven't been able to do that. It's obviously something that's very difficult to do. So I don't know how much you could blame AEW for not just recreating a new star. And I think some people want that. Like, some people think that MJF should like replace CM Punk as a major star, and that the fact that MJF as the champion in the center of the show hasn't delivered the same amount of viewership as CM Punk as the center of the show is seen as like a really big, mishap for AEW and a terrible sign for MJF as like a future star. But I think that's I think the difference is that AEW has some sort of creative ability to replace Josh Allen. They're Josh Allen like figure, as opposed to the Bills, who are just like, there's no real way to like create a quarterback who's going to be as good as Josh Allen.
I think I agree with you guys, but I want to hear Jim Ross's take first.
Continuing on with MJ talking
Oh.
about this in super chats. As a GM, Tony bet on an aging retired star, bet had big upside with a risk. Risk into reality. Punk's been hurt. Maybe it's that simple.
I think that is perhaps the biggest issue is Punk's absence.
Yeah. And he just follows up with that: is if Punk returns, numbers get good. Remember this super chat.
Like that's a bold prediction, MJ. Like I too think if the biggest star came back, that ratings would go up.
And then Sajizzle with another super chat. TK is horrible at capitalizing on stars. Jade, Ricky, Wardlow, OC, even Punk and Brian for their first few months, number one problem. So he's pointing to the booking of Tony Khan as the issue with fan interest decreasing.
Most of those people aren't stars, so I would start with that. The Bryan Danielson point is fair. I think Danielson came in and he had that big match with Kenny Omega. And then he kind of just became like an upper mid-card guy. He didn't feel like he was really Bryan Danielson, mega star, making the jump to AEW. So I think there is some validity to that. And some people would point to maybe the Danielson MJF program not being as hot as it could have been because Danielson spent kind of a long time not being presented as like this super uber special guy. I think Punk was presented like that. And that's why he was a difference maker for business.
Okay. Have we been through them all? Thank you for all your super chats.
We just got a super chat, but it's just a general thanking us of the job we do, so we could say that to the end.
Okay.
So,
we will spend some time talking about the potential W sale. We did talk about this a little bit for subscribers on the Patreon on Thursday. I did a show with Chris Ely, who's looking to take Chris Gullo's job, I think, on Thursday for the Patreon. Patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, where you can also get all my weekly TV ratings reports, the quarter hour reports, the Thursday Wrestlenomics 30 podcast that we do just for subscribers, the viewership spreadsheet slides that we're going through right now. We did talk about the news coming out of the Endeavor earnings call. There's a clip on social media that I've put out. So I spent some time on the phone with one MJ from NJ, who knows some things about finance that I don't understand. So let's talk first about what was actually said. And I do have this 30-second clip ready that I might as well play now. So let's listen here to Ari Emanuel. This is on February 28th. What day of the week was that? That was Tuesday. So this is Tuesday evening. This is Ari Emanuel, the CEO of Endeavor, talking about a potential W sale in Q&A.
As it relates to the WWE, it's an unbelievable product. Vince is an unbelievable, created a great business. We've had a long-standing relationship with them over 2 decades. We're doing, as I indicated, on-location business with them, Endeavor streaming business with them. His business is really valuable. But we're not going to do anything as it relates to kind of changing our leverage position right now.
Okay. So my initial reaction to that is, wow, sounds like he's not interested in buying. And Endeavor would probably have to do some sort of merger where they would split their company apart and put one part of it together with WWE. I have a more nuanced reading of that. But do you have any thoughts on that before we get going on that, Jesse?
What are some of? Do you know what are Endeavor's business relationship with WWE currently? Like he talks about streaming, on location streaming deals. Like what is he talking about?
So on location it's a travel package. So you could have gone to Montreal and you could have bought a travel package to go to the event and taken care of your hotel and travel. That there's a press release when that deal was announced like a year ago or something. Streaming, so the W Network, where it is still their own direct-to-consumer network internationally, is operated. That back end is operated by Endeavor. So those are the business relationships that W currently does have with Endeavor.
The big thing with me is Ari Emanuel, is he lying? Is he bluffing? Is he saying, we don't really have that much interest in WWE in an attempt to get the price down?
He's trying to not go to jail, as he explicitly said in his comment, which we did not play there. But a moment before that clip, he's responding to an analyst question who's asking about WWE, and he begins his response by saying, "Well, one is we don't, unless you want me to go to jail, we don't talk about our M&A practices."
Right. I think if we just talk about like Endeavor kind of at this point, if you're a WWE fan, like you should be praying that Endeavor buys this company.
Otherwise, the Saudis will buy it.
Otherwise, the Saudis will buy it, or something is going to happen regarding Vince.
Well, I think, are you under the impression that WWE has to do a transaction?
I asked you this a couple weeks ago. It would be very interesting, right, if WWE doesn't do a transaction, because
I think that is the likeliest outcome.
Well, the thing about if WWE doesn't get an offer, Vince doesn't want an offer, there's no buyers, Endeavor doesn't want it, he can't sell the Saudis don't want it, or whatever reason, Comcast isn't going to buy it, Liberty Media isn't going to buy it, Netflix isn't going to buy it. Yeah. Does Vince have to sell the company?
No.
To me,
there'll be shareholder lawsuits.
Yeah, the concerning factor is Vince comes back and he says, "I'm selling the company," and
make that an audio drop.
Do it. Vince comes back and he announces he's going to sell the company, and the stock price goes up. Oh my God, Vince is back and he's selling the company. Nick Khan's on CNBC and he's like, "Yeah, in 4 months we'll have the sale done." Like, their sale, and the stock price has gone significantly up, almost entirely related to speculation regarding to the sale. So if the sale doesn't happen, are there a lot of shareholder lawsuits related to the sale not happening? And that stock price is probably going to go down significantly because if there's no real buyer. So what happens? Does that mean if Endeavor doesn't want to buy the company and none of these other
I don't think shareholder lawsuits are an existential threat or a prohibitive factor. They're not good. You don't want them, but I think W could endure a shareholder lawsuit. I think so. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but they've settled 2 shareholder lawsuits in the recent past in 2014 because of the network not doing, I guess, as well as they had hoped, and in 2018 because of the MENA TV rights deal not happening.
Yeah,
and they're still alive.
There's a few. Did they settle those yet? Aren't there a few outstanding suits that have been filed recently in regards to
those?
Vince's...
If they get settled, the likeliest outcome, I think. Let's say W doesn't sell. The likeliest outcomes, I think, that all that stuff gets put into one class, and maybe it gets settled, maybe it gets defeated. I don't know.
But it would probably not be good for WWE.
You don't never want to be sued. You never want to have to settle. But WWE does have insurance to cover things.
But this would be a big deal, right? If they inflated the stock price and then ultimately didn't decide to sell, and that all of these buyers that they hinted at being interested are not interested in it.
Their defense, and I think it's a legitimate, was they've never suggested that there was interest. They have said clearly that it's possible that no transaction happens. They've been upfront about that.
So that's something that they have said publicly. So maybe that's it. Maybe they don't sell. But I think Endeavor, if we take Ari Emanuel's comments at face value, which maybe we shouldn't, but let's say we do, who does that lead to buy WWE? Doesn't seem like it's going to be Comcast.
No.
Things like Disney or Netflix buying them seem pie in the sky ridiculous ideas that were thrown out on articles that were just looking for any potential buyer and not necessarily maybe understanding what they were looking for.
Just given the ability to put a cap on live rights value like WWE is financially interesting, but I don't think it's a brand match for any of these companies. I don't think they want to be wholly responsible for this high risk company to their brand.
Right. So a lot of these prospective buyers are gone or off the table. Does that lead just the Saudis? And is the option
probably, or a team of people principally involving the
Saudis? And if the option is we're going to get sued by all of our shareholders unless I sell to the Saudis, does that play a role?
Maybe.
And if the Saudis know that they're the only people that can buy the company, are they going to pay as big of a price? If there's no bidding war, for WWE. That obviously hurts the prospective price. I guess the idea is the Saudis have unlimited money, so they don't care if they pay for a highly inflated value for the company. But if I was the Saudis, I'd be like, wait, why would I spend $9 billion on the company?
If $9 billion is truly his asking price, as was reported in Bloomberg about a week or so ago, and if the Saudis are the key real bidder that's left, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to pay $9 billion. Now, do they look at it and say, well, we're so interested, we value the public relations benefit of owning an American entertainment company so much that we're willing to pay that much? Maybe they will. Who knows? But yeah, it doesn't make there's certainly no competition here happening between some other bidder, apparently. Now, but maybe let's take a closer look at exactly what is being said here, because there's more here that we didn't play. I don't want to play a long clip here, but there's comments from the CFO as well. But anyway, I just want to highlight a few things that are said here and see if we can unpack some meaning. Ari Emanuel says, Vince McMahon's business is really valuable, but we are not going to do anything as it relates to kind of changing our leverage position. What is he talking about? Leverage position? What? Is he using a car jack here? What is he talking about there?
I'm not sure.
He's talking about debt. So Endeavor, as people know, is the parent company of UFC. UFC was bought for how much? Like $4 billion or something like that back in, what was it, 2015? Whatever year it was. And because of that, Endeavor is still paying off that debt. So this is from Endeavor IR. They still owe $5.2 billion in all of their debt. And a huge piece of that is the UFC obligation. So a lot of what they're talking about here in this comment is saying, hey, look, we know we have a big debt that we're working on paying off. We are not going to take on more debt. I think what Ari and the CFO are trying to say here is, look, if we want to reassure investors, we're not going to take on more debt, first and foremost, okay? W's great. We have a great relationship with him. Vince has created something super valuable, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but this debt, we're not going to add to it. Okay, because if we signal and message that we're going to add to our debt, that's probably not good for their stock price. So what else did they say here? He says, he throws it to the CFO, Jason Lublin, who says, we have $750 million of cash on the balance sheet. We have the ability to keep executing on M&A. We're an acquisitive company with using our cash and our public equity as deal closing currency. So I think there's room for this to mean is that maybe they can find somebody to partner with. That is, they would have to take their stock and use it to raise money. Basically say, okay, we're going to issue additional shares to our stock. In the short term, that will not be good for our investors. That will dilute the value of our stock. But if we need to raise, let's say like $3 billion to pay the premium on some sort of merger with WWE, we can issue a bunch of shares in Endeavor, issue them to private investors such as Sovereign Wealth, Saudi Arabia, and then get them involved in this, and maybe we can make a deal here that, along with our own, moderate cash contribution, will not put us further into debt. Does this all make sense? I think there's room for that in what they're saying here.
And this is something we've known about since like WWE first announced they were looking for a sale, and Endeavor was always a likely potential buyer, was that the size of Endeavor's ability to purchase a company like WWE is very different than like a Comcast or Amazon or one of these true gigantic companies that Endeavor would be having to take on someone to help pay for the acquisition. There's also a couple of other factors, I think, in regarding to the WWE sale. The first would be higher interest rates. Yeah. But the second would be definitely in the last 2 months or so, I've seen just across the board when it comes to talking about television is the more uncertainty about the long-term future of live TV rights and live sports TV rights. It's something that I think if people have been following kind of the collapse of a lot of the regional sports networks that have taken place recently.
Diamond Sports.
Yep. There's concern about the NBA, who's in the
Valley Sports.
That there's concern, I know, in the NBA circles about how valuable is the NBA really, because the NBA is negotiating its upcoming TV rights very soon. And so it seems to be, as opposed to like a year ago, people are a little bit less bullish on the market for live TV rights, and that's really what you're purchasing if you're going to buy WWE. If you're Endeavor,
look at the Pac-12; it's like the slowest sale process we've ever seen for sports college rights.
Yeah, and if you're Endeavor, like if Comcast were to buy WWE, it makes some sense because they would be interested in then airing WWE on their networks, NBC, on USA, on Peacock. As opposed to Endeavor, you're buying WWE largely because you're hoping you can make a lot of money off of the rights. You can sell the rights to NBCU or ESPN or anyone else or another streaming platform
and there would be a strong argument that a merged Endeavor, and what would probably happen is some of Endeavor would go independent, some of it would go into WWE, but that Endeavor with WWE would, with Endeavor's expertise in making deals, that they would be able to make even better deals than otherwise. Not to mention other synergies and ways they could.
But if the market is changing so much, where the kind of, I don't want to say the bubble is going to burst, but the bubble's not going to grow as rapidly as it had been, that maybe throws some more uncertainty to ponying up $9 billion to purchase WWE. Because what's that $9 billion price? A lot of that's got to be baked into speculation that the television rights are going to continue to increase a lot in value.
The market cap though, like the what the stock price is valued at right now, which is like $83, that's a market cap of $6.2 billion. So he's asking for something well over what the stock market is currently valuing it at. I mean, this is a Vince McMahon premium. This is not a Wall Street premium. This is the value of all shares right now, 6.2. He wants 9.
And someone would only pay 9, really. I mean, the Saudis for a different reason, but someone else would only pay 9 if they felt confident that they were going to make a lot of money on escalating TV rights fees. And I think, like, if we're talking 10, 15, 20 years from now, nobody knows what that's going to look like. And I think this year, 2023, has been kind of a wake-up call saying, like, maybe this thing isn't going to last forever. Maybe we're not going to get 2.5 times our rights fees every time. And we're reaching kind of a new phase of the streaming wars and streaming versus cable and linear versus nonlinear television and all of that stuff. And no one is quite certain how that's going to play out. So it would be a gamble to speculate on a cost that large for a company where a bulk of its revenue is coming from live television.
I mean, that has been suspected and speculated on for years, but we are approaching what seems to me like a real genuine hard situation where is streaming going to be as profitable as linear TV was for live sports? And I think the biggest sports properties are the likeliest to be safe here. The NFL, the NBA, it's the further down you get, the more uncertain I think it is. And WWE is somewhere in the middle down there.
It's interesting to see what role Netflix is going to play now that they did their first ever.
How was the Chris Rock show? Did you watch it?
I haven't watched it because I was on the road doing a wrestling show, but it didn't get great reviews. I'm
curious to see like how it did from like a operation standpoint. Like, the stream was good? Like, didn't crash for a bunch of people or things like that?
A lot of the complaints I saw was just about the special itself. But it'll be interesting to see if they actually delve into more live content. And obviously sports would probably be like the big factor in that. We do have a super chat regarding the sales talk, which kind of is so, and this is from Al, so it's probably the largest super chat we've ever had. So is WWE getting sold, or is this a bunch of hooks? And, just kind of add to that, is this just Vince McMahon's crazy inflated price just to say, hey, I tried?
Can someone reach out to Vince and ask him? Because he's the only one who knows.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk to people who are familiar with his thinking.
I don't know if anybody is truly familiar with his thinking.
Especially now.
Familiar enough to be confident in what the actual objective or conditions are here.
I think that Vince, just me, this is my personal opinion, I think that Vince announced that he was coming back to sell the company as a way to get back into some authoritative position within WWE, with the kind of incentive for investors and stockholders to be that they'll tolerate his presence.
Yeah.
And the image
and
that
it
his
creates
presence,
a media story too. That's a
Right.
distraction from he's back from sexual misconduct allegations.
and the his presence and what that brings. The incentive is that he is going to theoretically make them a lot of money when he sells the company.
Yeah. And to be clear here, the stock price did move up in response to the news that he's coming back to sell the company. I mean, it went up to as high as 90. It's back down to 83, but it's still higher than it was at the end of the year before it was clear that he was coming back. So there is baked in, just for people who may not be familiar, there is baked into the stock already speculation and hope that this company will sell. I've written, I don't think this is an appropriate price for the stock, even $84, 83 and a half, where it's at right now. I think there's more uncertainty about a sale than the stock price reflects. And as I said earlier, the most likely outcome to me is there will be no sale.
To get to Allison's question, back to Allison's question, I think Vince used that incentive to get back in power. Is he seriously considering a sale, or is this all like a big ruse? I think in his mind, he would consider a sale that would be very good for him in his terms, which would probably be a very big offer that would also allow him to be in power. I think he's open to that. But is he really going to just sell the company? Because that was his big idea was, if we take everything Vince has said at face value, it's that Vince retired from the company because he was just felt like he was too old.
Yeah.
And then one day he was sitting around 6 months after he retired and said, you know what? I got to sell the company. It's time to sell.
You got to do the best thing for shareholders.
Yep. And he's come back and he's like, you know what, guys, just, if you elect me chairman of the board, I'll get done with this sale. Don't worry. And so if we take Vince solely at face value, all he's doing is just he's selling the company. He's not involved in anything else. He wants to sell the company for whatever reason. He's old. He doesn't really want to work anymore, but he wants to sell the company. But we kind of know that there's probably other things in play. He probably wants more authority within the company. He wants more creative decision making and things like that. So I think part of him coming back to announce a sale was because he wanted more power in the company. And the only way to really do that was to kind of say, well, I'm coming back, but don't worry, all you investors are going to make a lot of money. I do think in his mind, he's open to the right kind of sale. Whether that right kind of sale would ever happen is a big question. And whether he even anticipates that right kind of sale to happen is a different question.
And what's a big bargaining chip here is, if somebody buys the company, or if there's some sort of transaction, how many shares does Vince have left? How much control does he have? What agreements are made is about how much authority and power he can have in the company? Can he get a Dana White deal where he's allowed to be in charge of the company? Or if it's a major media company, they're probably going to want him out. And that's, I think, at least one reason why nobody wants to do it.
MJ is reminding us in the chat that they announced a strategic review.
Thank you. Strategic alternatives review.
Alternatives of the company. But I think they've come out and said, Nick Khan has certainly said that they're selling, or they're exploring a sale.
It's synonymous. Yeah.
But speaking of possible buy, go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
No. I mean, I'm done.
I was just going to segue to just one more super chat. Speaking of possible buyers, Sajizzle asks, is Appel possible? The Monster Factory documentary is out soon.
Appel is extremely unlikely. I think Appel, as a brand, doesn't want to own a wrestling company. I don't think that's a good brand fit for Appel. I think Appel obviously is interested in live sports rights, MLS, MLB. Maybe they want other stuff too. But I don't think they want wrestling because of the brand association that wrestling has.
You don't think Apple TV wants the WWE library?
No. I think they want All Japan in the 90s, though. That's the highbrow brand for them.
Does more like Battle Arts.
Battle Arts, but UWFI, Rings, maybe.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, what are major, I'm sure it's happened. What are like major things that Apple has purchased, outright purchased? Like, have they purchased entertainment brands before?
I don't know.
Like the Charlie Brown stuff, like they bought like the Peanuts library and stuff like
Did
that.
they?
Yeah.
For their
They've made a lot of IT acquisitions, according to.
Oh, I'm sure. Obviously, I'm trying to think if they've ever purchased like an entertainment brand, like something that runs live events.
Shazam, the app that tells you what song you're hearing.
Yeah, tech. That's a tech purchase. Though.
Right.
I'm thinking like if Apple has ever purchased, like we talked about this with Comcast, right? There's like Comcast, like they own the Philadelphia Flyers, like the family that owns Comcast owns the Philadelphia Flyers. So like that's kind of at least something. Like Disney owns like touring brands and stuff like that, like Disney on Ice. But does Apple own anything like that would be even remotely comparable to WWE from like how they would have from a business perspective?
I'm looking at a list on Wikipedia, and very few of these companies even
It's all
have their own
tech,
Wikipedia
yeah.
page. It looks like all tech assets.
Right, they're buying tech startups and things like that pop up.
Right. If I'm predicting what Vince McMahon is going to do, I think there's going to be no transaction. I think there's going to have to be a TV deal. There's going to have to be the beginning of a TV deal negotiations happening in like May, and that's been made pretty clear based on think about Nick Khan's comments on the CNBC call where he says, "Give it how fast do you think a deal will get done?" And he says maybe 3 months, and that's consistent with other things we've heard about. They're going to start negotiating a deal after WrestleMania, so April, May, and that's consistent with previous rounds of negotiations 5 years ago and 5 years before that. Deals were done in the spring around May, so that's what I expect. I expect you could have a deal done in May, and then maybe by once all that stuff's out of the way, then there's no liability or risk, or maybe it won't scare off potential TV networks that they're making deals with if Vince comes back before then. So all that's done, maybe he can come back. When I say come back, I mean come back to creative after then. That would
Publicly come back to creative.
That would be my cynical prediction. Vince back in creative by the summer, but who knows? Okay. I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. Do we have anything else?
Well, there was a couple things you had in the slides you wanted to touch on real quick.
There's All Access is debuting on March 29th. Basically, just to say, this is what Rose to the Top did in terms of ratings. It'll be on at 10 on TBS after Dynamite. What did Rose to the Top do in a demo? It did somewhere between a 0.11 and a 0.19. Power Slap in the same time slot has done between a 0.08 and a 0.13. So got to do in the teens, I would think, to be considered doing well. The reality show.
Compared to Power Slap, how much do you think they paid for Power Slap?
Very little.
You think it was a minor investment?
I think there's a great benefit for Dana White and even for UFC to have that relationship with David Zaslav and WBD, because they got to do their own TV rights deal in like a year or something like that. So why not do something that can improve that relationship that could really pay off for UFC? Meanwhile, Dana White has, I guess this is a separate business from UFC, right? Power Slap is, so maybe
yeah,
pay-per-view or whatever it is.
Did you hear what happened to the Power Slap pay-per-view event?
No.
It is not going to be. My understanding is that it's not going to be available on traditional pay-per-view.
Oh, it is happening.
It is only available on something called Rumble.
Something called Rumble. You don't know what Rumble is?
I'm led to believe it's like an alt-right pay-per-view streaming.
It's
service?
it's a YouTube for people who cannot be on YouTube anymore, I think.
Okay.
Gullo, have you been approached to be a ring announcer for Power Slap?
Not Power Slap, but I brought this up before. I did get a booking inquiry about an independent slap boxing competition that wanted a ring announcer. So now this is a thing, I guess, and I respectively declined.
Okay, that's all I have for this week.
We do have a couple more super chats about other questions. Sijizzle asks, should Revolution be considered a B pay-per-view?
There's only four key pay-per-views for AEW. I don't think any of them should be considered a B pay-per-view. Maybe you build one of them up to be your WrestleMania, but no.
I think informally, Double or Nothing and All In or All Out feel like the biggest pay-per-views that they have. Mainly it's because they're on holiday weekends and they're in the same location. So
and they both have history in terms of All Out aligning with All In's history and Double or Nothing
being the first event. But I think like Revolution and Full Gear are those kind of like the B pay-per-views. But that's not really reflected in like Revolution's pay-per-view buys. I mean, I think Revolution last year did quite well, and I know the exploding barbed wire ring match that they had the year before also did a really good number on pay-per-view. So Revolution seems to be pretty competitive when in terms of pay-per-view buys.
Revolution did better than Double or
the other
Nothing
pay-per-views
in 2022 and 2021. It did better than Double or Nothing on pay-per-view.
Yeah. So like I think in my mind, like Double or Nothing and All In or All Out are like the biggest AEW events, but from a business perspective, Revolution seems to be on par with any of them.
I don't think any of these brands have that much distinction. They're just names for pay-per-views.
Right. There's no WrestleMania. There's no Royal Rumble. There's no SummerSlam.
There's no gimmick match that's really associated with any of them. I'm sure if Tony was he'd be telling us about the Casino Battle Royal actually is Double or Nothing. I don't know though.
But they have that all the time. That's just the kind of their term of Battle Royals. You're right.
The Revolution ladder match, the face of the Revolution. Come on now.
Yeah.
Can't forget that.
It happened on Dynamite.
Yeah, I mean, and there's...
But before Revolution. So the tradition kept going.
But do you think there's strengths and weaknesses to like having all pay-per-views kind of being seen as equal as opposed to the big WrestleMania one? Obviously, the WrestleMania and to a lesser extent the Royal Rumble branding has helped WWE, I think, a lot, perception-wise. But is that perception also come with the negative in the sense that WWE has all these other pay-per-views that people are significantly less interested in?
I think it's a net benefit to have one biggest show of the year that's far bigger than the others.
Yeah, I think WWE goes a little too far when you have like month to month. This is an A pay-per-view. This is a B pay-per-view. This is a pay-per-view. This is a B pay-per-view. I think AEW, because it doesn't have that kind of historical backing behind the pay-per-view names, it really does seem dependent on what are the matches heading into each event.
We did get a super chat, a monetary donation there from Wesley White. So thank you, Wesley, for that. Scroll down here. Very busy day in the chat. So thank you for everybody who's involved. The mayor of Painesville, Dan, just said, I am impressed on how deep the research for this video has been and how level-headed you guys worked through this somewhat sensitive topic, or at least for some. Keep on the great work. Let's go, Brandon. But I think he's actually just saying, Brandon, good job. Hopefully not the other term.
Yes, thank you. Have you had to ban anybody today, Gullo? In the chat?
I have not had to ban anybody today. I must make a clarification. I'm not saying that I liked Vince Russo's booking earlier. I'm just talking about a business run from 1996.
You said you liked Vince Russo's booking earlier?
I was mentioning good booking runs, great booking runs. Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan, Vince Russo. I meant it in a business perspective.
He said he thinks Vince Russo should come back now.
I do not. I absolutely do not. I am not a Vince Russo stan. I just want to clarify that. MJ does have he put in the super chat as soon as we wrapped up the Endeavor talk. What happens if potential bidders to buy WWE decide to lowball TV rights to drive valuation down to a range they are interested in?
Is it as simple as that? If let's say the incumbents give them a low offer, well, we'll see what other people they'll let it go to the open market and see what others bid, and supply and demand will determine the value, I guess.
And what serious potential bidders are also bidding for TV rights? We can say NBCU. Who else is Disney,
Fox,
ESPN,
Amazon?
Is Fox a potential buyer though for WWE
of TV rights?
Right, but they also
I don't think they're a real
to buy WWE.
No,
right. So maybe some of the streaming services you could point out too, but it seems like Endeavor and the Saudis are the most realistic buyers at this point. So and they're not; those aren't going to be. I think it's limited. It seems this would seem to only work if like all of the networks were like kind of working together to kind of collude against WWE TV rights.
Sounds like antitrust to me.
But it would seem like outside of NBCU, none of the television bidders would really be interested in buying WWE. So if NBCU wanted to lowball WWE, I'm sure WWE would be happy to sell Fox.
I guess like theoretically no sale could happen. They could go to TV rights negotiations and then Comcast could buy them at that point. But I'm pretty confident Comcast is not going to buy WWE under any circumstance in the foreseeable future. Okay. Anything else, Gullo?
That is it. Thank you all. A lot of super
Thank
chats
you.
today. And like I said, we're
going to do nothing but AEW anxiety podcasts from now on.
We had from like 88 to 105 viewers like throughout the show, pretty much.
Join us again next week for Is AEW Dead? Is AEW going out of business?
It might be. We have to see what happens with Revolution. It might be time to read its last rites. What if it does a 0.27 next week? I think that's it, right? That's a wrap.
Will AEW sell? Let's just start making things up at this point.
Go. Any plugs? Go. I heard you have a big deal commentary job.
Yeah. So the infamous of oldies, they're known for the independent wrestling and territories and all that. They have an extensive wrestling library, and they've enlisted my services to do commentary on some stuff that's got some lost audio. So some IW Puerto Rico stuff, some ICCW stuff, of course. Gonna work on some USWA Dallas stuff that apparently they own. So no, I'm actually looking forward to calling some footage that was.
And how will this be distributed? How would fans be able to?
They
watch
have
this
high
initially?
spots, and I'm not 100% sure if this is the stuff they will put on Pluto TV, because they usually put stuff on Pluto TV as far as the classic wrestling blocks that you'll see.
Have you recorded this yet?
I put them on social media. I'm actually looking forward to it. There's a lot of stories about the Savaldis and all that, but
So not yet
I'm looking
recorded.
forward to this. Oh, not
yet
recorded.
recorded.
No, I've not recorded yet.
So
no.
you're going to be calling like old Carlos Colon matches?
So IW Puerto Rico. So like I did
Okay.
get the list, and there's like some matches with like Glamour Boy Shane and Bison Smith and Carlitos and
okay, so like more
Blitz
like early
and-
2000s stuff.
yes, it's a lot of early 2000 stuff. The first match I'm calling is I think from 1993, Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Bubba Ray Dudley before he was Bubba Ray Dudley. So
In 1993.
yes, yeah, I'm assuming that's the year on this, because I haven't looked at the year yet, but I'm assuming that's when they would both be in the same ring together. So
Okay. Any plugs, Jesse? Would you have more, Gullo?
Sure,
no, it wasn't.
Sure. You can listen to me on the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. We recently joined the Voices of Wrestling Network. So now the podcast is available pretty much anywhere you can get your podcast from: Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. It's, of course, always been available on YouTube and remains so. I had an episode that we recorded on Friday. I was joined by Maura Johnston, who's a professional music journalist and also a professor of journalism at Boston College. And we talked a lot about pro wrestling and how it fits into pop culture in 2023 and some of the trends we see in pop culture and celebrity status and how it relates to the professional wrestling industry. And we talk a lot about like star power and the differences in how someone can be a major star today versus being a major star in the 90s. And I think it's gotten great reviews. It's got a lot of interesting highbrow conversations, intellectuals only. If you're not interested in that, you shouldn't listen to it.
Well, this is the perfect crossover promotion then, right?
It really is. Like the highbrow listenership of Wrestlenomics would probably be fascinated in the discussions that two professional intellectuals like myself and the academic Maura Johnson discuss about the pro wrestling industry.
Okay. That's it. Thanks for all your super chats today. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next Sunday at 11, and we'll be back in audio for subscribers on Thursday night with Gullo for the Thursday 30. See you then.